Welcome back, everybody. We're going to try to keep this quick and just put a little bit of polish on our rock by giving it a texture, taking our UV into Photoshop. So let me show you how it's done. So I'm going to continue looking for little pieces that are kind of spread out from the main body of the model, and selecting edges, going to cut and sew, move and sew, and then go check out my model and make sure that this is looking like an improvement and not like I'm actually making things worse, because it's definitely possible to make the texture become more stretched out by combining things in the wrong way. So check your work. It's not always the right move to move and sew, but in a lot of cases, you will be able to make your model look better. Now that I have this sort of consolidated to one shell, one large piece, keep in mind there are some areas that overlap, which on a more detailed model, this wouldn't be optimal and we might need to fix. But because today we're just doing a rock, this should be good enough. Another thing to remember before you do your UV snapshot, because we're about to send this to Photoshop, is that you cannot have your UV be so large or so spread out that we're seeing anything outside of U1V1 1001. If you see anything in U1V1 or 1002 or 1012 up here, that's not going to show up in your snapshot. So we need to keep everything in this little U1V1 1001 section. So with our UV layout contained in here and looking good enough to get started, I'm going to make sure that I'm in object mode with my object selected. Then I'm going to click on the camera icon. If you were following along while we were working on the house, then you shouldn't need to change the image format or the edge color if you already set those properly, though you will want to rename this. So I've changed this to be Rock UV instead of House UV, and then I'm going to apply and close, and I'm going to find that UV on my desktop. Easiest way is to control click, open with Photoshop, and here is my UV. I'll do that solid color fill trick so that you guys can see it a little bit better. And remember to put this layer below your UV layer. So there are the lines for my rock. And for something like this, I can probably just go to Google and I literally search for Mars rock texture. Now I see some here that are examples of assets, but I can also find some pretty good things that I could use as a texture that could work out for my model. So after downloading one of these and saving it to my desktop, I can simply drag and drop it into Photoshop. Now this I'm going to make the top layer so that it covers up my lines after I've placed it. I'm going to place it without stretching it out, so I'm going to hold down Shift because I don't want to stretch out my image here after I went through all that work to make sure that it doesn't get stretched out in Maya. And making it the top layer and or turning off layer 0 so that we don't see the lines. Then simply File, Save As. I'm going to make sure that I change this to PNG, and I'll call this Rock UV Textured, because now I have my texture. Saving that, going back into Maya, and now you'll remember that you can two-finger click on your object and go all the way down to Assign New Material. Now this is a rock, so I don't want it to be very shiny. The easy choice here is a Lambert. And instead of assigning it a color, I click on the checkerboard icon to the right, then I choose File. Over here, I need to click on this file folder to go find the file, which I have saved on my desktop as Rock UV Texture PNG. Once again, my texture is here, but to see it, I need to turn on textures in the scene by clicking on the textured circle right here. And I think that looks pretty decent. There is a little bit of stretching, like if we look right in here, we could go back into our UV editor and we could still fix that even after applying it. So that stretch there bothers me a little bit. But let's face it, most people playing a game would have a hard time spotting a little problem like that. Overall, this looks pretty decent. So real quick, just an example, if you're feeling picky and you want to make this as good as possible, you can go back into the UV editor and we can try to figure out exactly where this is and if there's an easy way that we can fix it. So say I select an edge around where this problem is. I may, by scaling or moving that edge, be able to do something to improve this. I may even want to go and do something like go into face mode and then go to cut and sew and cut this face out. And now it matters whether you're making this change in the UV editor or the actual scene. So I'm going to go into the UV editor and I'm going to see what I can do to tweak this. I may actually go take this vertex and see what I can do with it. So some of these things are tied together in ways that you can't necessarily undo. So it's a little bit of a balancing act to get it to look the way that you want it. Alright, that didn't completely fix the problem, but it has made that stretching a little less pronounced, and if I spent more time on it, I'd probably get this to be almost completely unnoticeable if there's any stretching going on here. But so far, so good. You see the progress, and you could go and you could model a little bit on top of this yet. But we've come a long way from a cube, right? This is starting to look like something good enough that we could put it into our Mars scene, and we'll do that next time. Don't forget to save your work. And be sure to take a screenshot and share it in the comments so that we can all see each other's progress. Good luck and have fun.